So great, thanks so much for attending, everyone, this evening. So I'm Matt Lewandowski, one of the faculty who work here with the students at the Fels Institute of Government. You're probably also seeing Mindy Zacharias, who's our program director. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to share my screen and go over a brief PowerPoint presentation. It takes roughly 25-ish minutes for us to go through that. Then we'll open it up to some Q&A. If you have a question while the PowerPoint's going on, you can go ahead and throw that up in the chat. And if it's straightforward, Minnie will kind of respond to it as we're going through. If not, if it's something that maybe is going to take a little bit longer to respond to, we'll kind of hold it and we'll go over it in the Q&A once we finish with that. So I'm going to go ahead and this, so you should now all be seeing this. And okay, so thanks so much everyone for coming to our first information session for the 2020-2021 academic year here at the Fels Institute of Government. So the Fels Institute of Government has a really long and very storied history. Right, so it's been around for more than 80 years, and I would like to begin with this slide. So the first shot that you saw there, that red brick building, this is the same red brick building you're actually seeing here in this photo. In fact, this scene takes place just outside of where we usually hold these information sessions on the first floor of the Fels Mansion. So the man you see speaking at the microphone is Samuel Fels, who has both a tremendous amount and nothing at all to do with public administration. So why did I give that slightly cheeky answer? So in some ways he has nothing at all to do with it because he wasn't someone who did public administration. He ran a soap company, the Fels Naphtha Soap Company. It was what his father had founded, then he and his brother ran it throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And then he became, as kind of a wealthy, leading Philadelphian, very involved in philanthropy, concerned about the problem of corruption in Philadelphia. So there's a famous report by the muckraker Lincoln Steffens that said Philadelphia was the most corrupt city in America. And at the time, during the Gilded Age, that really was something of an accomplishment. Mr. Fels brought together a set of leaders within the city of Philadelphia to say, we really need to do something to train better public servants to be involved with government, people who are highly skilled and who will be able to help us avoid the problems of corruption and ill governance that have plagued this city, right? So the kind of launching of that conference led Fels to then found something called the Institute for State and Local Government, and then when he died, he gave his mansion to that institute, so then became the Fels Institute of Government, a name we carry with us to this day, right? So for more than 8 decades, right, Fels has been leading the way to training the next generation of public sector leaders, right? So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what makes Fels unique. I'll share a little bit about some of our students as we do that. I'll talk a little bit about our curriculum, and then I'll wrap up with some other kind of information about our degrees and programs. So what makes Fels unique, right? There's a lot of places where you can get an MPA degree. Why would you want to come study at Fels? And we think what we offer is the best combination of practical, analytical, and personal, right? So what does that mean, right? That there are maybe other places that can do one of these better, but we think we give you the best approach that combines all 3 of these things. So let's break down what we mean by each one of these separate factors. What do we mean by practical? Well, we are a hands-on sort of place where we want students to really do things in the real world, right? So we obviously believe strongly in theory, but we think that theory always has to be paired with praxis, right? So in all of our courses, we try to incorporate course projects, right? So for example, in Professor Russell's class in program evaluation, they work with real data sets from the city of Philadelphia, right? In Professor DeBernardinis' class on public management and leadership, they go through different initiatives the city has undertaken, from the Rebuild Initiative to Zero Waste and Litter, right, to Parks and Rec, right, and understand how these things actually work in the real world, right? So while we try to give you lots of theory, we also show you how that practice is working in the real world. Second, we also pair for all of our full-time students a required internship, right? So that you take the skills you learn in the classroom and put them to use out there in an actual job. And then everyone, both full-time and executive students, does a capstone project where they bring together the skills that they've learned during the program, and they learn how to pull it together and solve a problem for a real world organization. So I think what's really neat about that is that it's not just, you know, a kind of class project or something. You actually work hand in hand with an organization. They give you a real challenge that they need to solve. And then you say, okay, how do I take the skills I've learned in this program and help them solve this challenge? Now that challenge can take a lot of different forms. That might be helping them develop a new strategic plan. That might be helping them to do a program evaluation, right? That might be helping them, right, to figure out a kind of planning exercise, right? There's lots of different forms those capstones have taken. I think what unites them all is a real focus on making an actual deliverable for a real world organization. And so Matt Forrest, who graduated in 2019, I think is a nice example of this. Right, so Matt came to Fels after having worked with City Year for several years, and was really interested in understanding how to do things in a very practical, hands-on way. Worked with LISC, which is a local kind of nonprofit umbrella and local government umbrella, to help them develop kind of a better sort of toolkit for their members to understand how to interface with different kinds of government agencies, right? So really putting those practical skills to the test. But of course, you don't just need practical skills, you also need analytical skills as well, right? So we think that you really need to know different kinds of things now than you might have needed to know 25 years ago, right? So a lot of the core is still the same, but we live in a modern data-driven world, right? People need to know statistics and data science, right? And if you're, nervous and you say, oh, I don't like statistics, they scare me, don't worry. I actually, so I'm the one who kind of started that sequence here at Fels, and I passed it on. Now one of my former students now teaches it, and she's fantastic. She will put you at ease with statistics. She's a fantastic teacher. And so you'll see that as many students in the past have, they'll come in saying, oh, that's my least favorite class. And they'll come out saying, oh, I actually like it a lot, right? We think you also need to know something about economics and public finance, so you understand how governments and nonprofits set budgets, right? And government policy helps to shape economic decisions that both public and private actors make, right? And you need to know something about leadership and policy as well, right? What is the public policy process? How do you interface with it, right? How do you drive things forward, right? So that you're not just a manager, but you're someone driving change, you're a leader. And I think Pauline is a nice example of this. So she also graduated in 2019. Actually, I think all three of our students in the deck did. And Pauline's an interesting case. She was yet again someone else who came in and said, oh, I don't know about the statistics, but took some classes, she found love with it, and then went to work for the DA's office here in Philadelphia and helped them do the program evaluation when the DA's office started phasing out cash bail, right? So that's a case where, you really have to know, your data, your statistics, how you're going to analyze that data, because this isn't just a class project, right? This is something that a lot of people are going to be looking at, and public policy decisions are going to be made by it. Right? So that's why you need these sorts of skills, right, to drive change forward in the real world. Finally, you need to do all this from a personal perspective, right? Lots of places can give you the first two things, but if you go to somewhere like the Harris School or the Ford School or the Wilson School, you're going to be a cohort of 100, 250, 500 students in your class. You're going to be a cohort of 30. It makes a big difference, right? We're going to be able to give you individualized career services and mentoring with Colleen, who's our fantastic career services coordinator. She, meets with each student and helps them figure out what their skills are, where they've been, where they want to go, the kinds of things they're looking to pick up in their degree, right? We'll talk later on a little bit about our mentoring program, where we pair each student with some of them are Fels alums, some of them are just kind of, folks we know kind of in the general area, right, who's kind of taken a similar path. And it's just a way for you to connect with someone else, expand your network a little bit, and talk with someone else. Okay, you've achieved position X in the public sector. I'd really like to go there. How can I do that? What are the kinds of things that I need to do to be successful in this sort of career? Right? It's also a customizable degree. We'll talk a little bit later on, just briefly, about some dual degrees that we offer. But that's one way of doing it. But even for folks that don't want to pursue a dual degree, right? We have a core curriculum, but we also have some elective choices that really allow you to make the program your own. Right? And you'll do this in a small cohort, where I always tell people, I think the connections you make to the faculty and to the speakers and the guests that we bring in are really valuable. But in some ways, the most valuable thing is actually the connections you make to the people in your cohort and the cohorts around you, right? I used to be surprised, but I've stopped being surprised, as I know this is just the kind of place that Fels is, that I'll meet people who are alumni who graduated 30 years ago, and they'll tell me, oh, I still talk, every couple months to 5 different people, that I graduated with. And, we formed lifelong bonds with one another. And that matters a lot, right? And so I think Sarah is another person who's a good example of this. She took advantage of the customizability by combining her MPA with her Master of Science in Social Policy in the School of Social Policy and Practice. And I think she is another good example of someone who came in, wasn't excited about the kind of analytical skills, but then when she saw that she could work on issues of homelessness and housing security, which are her real passion, right? She was like, oh, I really can see how you can use these things, and then work through the Fels network, right, to connect her to the sort of job that she was ultimately interested in having, right? So that shows you a little bit how you can learn to take theory and practice, that analytical and practical, and marry them, and do so within the context of a highly personalized program. And we think that gives you a pretty unique edge if you're interested in pursuing a career in the public sector. So, I always talk about, we're analytical, we're practical, and we're personal. And I always say we kind of have another half of a P, and that's that we're rooted in Philadelphia, right? So I say we're rooted in Philadelphia because we have a long tradition, as I mentioned. Samuel Fels, when he founded the Institute, was really concerned about the city of Philadelphia. And we honor those roots. I think if you know anything about kind of City Hall and in the kind of structure of Philadelphia city government, you know that there are literally hundreds of Fels graduates working throughout the city government, throughout the region, throughout state government. But I always say we sit in Philadelphia and we're rooted here and we're proud of those roots, but we look out to the world. So we have Fels alumni that work not just in this area or in this region, but in DC, in New York, in California, right? And indeed around the globe, right? So we're rooted here, but we look out to a broader community as well. So let's talk a little bit about the 2 different degree programs that Fels offers. Okay, so we'll talk about the full-time and executive MPA programs. We'll kind of skip over the certificates. I'll explain what that is when we get to it. So let's start with the full-time MPA. So this is a 12-month program that involves 9 CUs of coursework. And this is directed at students who have an average of 2 to 4 years of post-baccalaureate experience. Now, there are plenty of students who are going to come straight from undergraduate into this program, and plenty of students who have significantly more than 2 to 4 years of work experience. That's just a rough kind of average, right? So this is really aimed at people who say, okay, I have a year, I can pause my career, come back to school full time, and know that at the end of that year, I'm going to be getting the degree that's going to help me move to the next stage of my career, right? And so this is an on-campus degree. This year, I guess we should say on-campus means at least for the fall semester hybrid, but normally we'd be just meeting in a regular kind of face-to-face classroom. Okay, so basically the course plan for this, right? Remember I told you there were 3 tracks of data, or 3 tracks of classes, right? And then an individualized component to it. So the curriculum is set up So you take 9 courses and do an internship across 3 semesters. So how does that work? So in the fall, so our current students who just started, gosh, a month ago, time flies, are taking this first set of courses. They're doing statistics for public policy, doing public economics and public law and public processes, right? And they're also taking their first elective. One of the cool things about the electives is that you can literally take almost anything you want. So we offer some electives in Fels. So I think this semester we're offering a class on housing policy, and we're offering a class on public speaking and something else that's escaping me. Oh, who gets elected and why. But there are electives that people can take in social policy, in criminology, in housing policy in Wharton, in city planning, which is here in the School of Design, right? There are, other electives people have taken in applied economics, right? In the School of Public Health, right? There are electives all over campus. Basically, if you're interested in it, there's almost certainly going to be a class on it at Penn. I'm always kind of amazed at the diversity of things that people manage to find to take here and how interesting all of them are, right? I really think one of the great things about studying at Penn is that, it has really strong programs in almost everything, right? So chances are, if you're interested in it, there's someone else on campus who's teaching a class about it. In the spring, what you'll do is you'll take a second class in each one of those tracks that builds on the first class. So you'll do program evaluation, which is going to take the tools of statistics and show you how to use them to see if public programs are actually working or not. You'll use the tools of public economics to understand public finance, right, and understand the ways in which government policy, matters, and that's really essential for people who are going to work in state and local government, right? We've actually been hearing a lot about this in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, right? Not just the increased cost of responding to COVID itself, but the consequences of the economic fallout in terms of reduced taxes, increased demand for social services, right? This is a really important topic at all times, but especially at this point in time. And then you'll build on the public law and processes class with public management and leadership, where you'll learn how to take those tools and drive change forward in the public sector. You'll also take your second elective, right, which again is going to allow you to build on whatever kind of topic of interest you started with in the fall, or even something different. Then finally in the summer, what you'll do is you'll complete your capstone project and you'll take your internship. I say complete the capstone project, right, because it really begins kind of in the spring semester. So we have a kind of system set up to match students, and then they start doing work on it in the spring so that you're kind of finishing up over the summer while you're doing your internship, right? So within that 12-month period, right, it's an intense process, but we really think it gives you the skills that you need, right, to get you where you need to go. Now, we also offer a second program for people who are working full-time and will only want to go to school, part-time. So this is our executive program. It's a 21-month part-time program. Now, this is for people who have typically significantly more work experience. Although again, it's going to be a big range, right? Some people are only going to have a few years experience. Some people are going to have 20, 25 years work experience. It really kind of varies from person to person, right? So that 5 to 10 years is just a very rough average. And so what this program does is it is going to meet normally, right, once a week on Monday evenings. You'll meet in the evening for a class over Zoom. And then once a month, you come together for an intensive weekend on campus as its normal kind of schedule, right? So that's why we say it has a mix of on-campus and virtual learning. So this is going to be a little bit different in that it's 21 months. So it's 1 full year and then 1 academic year after that. So here, because it's a part-time program, you're only going to take 2 classes per semester. So you'll start off by taking statistics and public management. Then you'll move on and take program evaluation and public economics. Then you'll go on and take a public finance class and the performance imperative, right, which is another class about how to use performance management to drive change in the public sector. Then in the fall of your second year, you'll take 2 electives, And then in the spring of your second year, right, you'll take your final elective and you'll complete your capstone, right? So that notice it's a very, very similar structure, just split up now. Instead of running over 2 semesters full-time, it's running over 5 semesters part-time, right? Because you can't take as many classes. Okay. We offer some certificates for currently enrolled students. So these are ways of deepening your degree if you're interested in one of these areas. So you can kind of combine some classes at Fels with some classes elsewhere in the university. I'm happy to, I won't dwell on them now, but happy to answer questions about them in the Q&A. So just to give you a sample, I said that, you know, we offer a variety of different electives, and these are just ones we offer here at Fels, right? There's going to be literally hundreds more offered across the university. So we've offered classes on conducting negotiations, on public communications, which is about how you present your message and convey your point through public speaking and public communication. Government relations, right? So how do you lobby effectively? Ones on politics, policy, and religion and how that intersects with the upcoming election. Certainly one that's very timely at the moment as we're considering, you know, a new Supreme Court justice, and there could be, you know, important debates in the confirmation hearing about that person's perspective on issues like the Roe v. Wade case or the Obergefell decision, right? Classes on urban housing policy, right? Classes on, you know, children in the law and leading nonprofits, right? Data science for public policy. So really, you know, we run the gamut across a whole wide range of things here at Fels. And as I mentioned before, I think one of the things we do really nicely is we give you customized career services, again, because it's relatively small, right? So how are we, you know, kind of doing that? Well, part of that's going to be, as I talked about, with that one-on-one career counseling with Colleen, but we also do a variety of other things to help you, right? So your internship and capstone are often an important way that students go and get jobs, right? Because you're making connections with those organizations, and that worked for several students this year. We've got that mentoring program that I mentioned where we're pairing you up with a more senior mentor, right? We have our public policy and practice speaker series run by our senior fellow, Elizabeth Vale. You can find out more information about that on our website, where we bring in a kind of high level speaker. We've got some great folks this fall. We had Wally Idenyo from the Obama Foundation come and speak a few weeks ago. We've got Pennsylvania Secretary of Health Rachel Levine coming to talk about her experience leading the state through the COVID-19 pandemic. And then perhaps most excitingly, right after the election, we'll be having Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren come and speak with us. And what's really cool about public policy and practice is it's a large event that's open to the public, right? Because these are relatively high profile folks. But we always have a little session just for Fels students where those people get to meet in a group. Usually we have 6 or 10 Fels students who get to, you know, take them to lunch and just kind of have a kind of one-on-one conversation with someone who's a kind of distinguished public leader. We also do a variety of career talks as well as our advising. So career talks are just where we bring someone in and they talk about how they got the career they have. And then finally, the Fels Alumni Network and QuakerNet, which is Penn's internal alumni database, are great. The Fels alumni are both large and really passionate about Fels. So, you know, they all love talking to, you know, current Fels students, and they love connecting them with opportunities, right? And that, you know, certainly that goes true for anyone in the mentoring program, but even more broadly, you know, everyone who I meet who's a Fels alum and they find I have something to do with Fels, they tell me how much they love to meet the students and find out what they're doing and connect them with other, you know, opportunities, because they all say, well, someone did that for me and I want to help pay that forward. So obviously, right, one of the concerns about coming to a place like Penn is, can I afford this? And, you know, obviously there's a cost, but I want to convey that we've worked as hard as we can to make this as affordable as possible, right? So we've worked to reduce the time to degree and the number of courses students have, but we've also worked to expand our scholarships and financial aid. So for students who need it, which basically it's open to all full-time students, right? We give them something we call public leadership and service, or a PLAS fellowship. And what that is it's a grant of up to $5,000 to help them take a public sector internship that doesn't pay, right? Unfortunately, if you know anything about the public sector, there are many internship opportunities, almost none of them pay. So we wanted people to take the right internship rather than an internship that paid, because we know, everyone's got to, pay the rent and eat and, do those sorts of things. So we give people that grant to help them finance the right kind of internship for them, right? So they get the skills they need to succeed in the public sector. We also offer something that we're very proud of that we call the 15 for 5 program. So for people who have 5 years of public service, whether that's in the military or in state and local government or the federal government, right? So if you have 5 years of government service, then you can qualify for a $15,000 scholarship. So we've had a number of students come that way. So people who've worked in local government, people who've worked in the federal government, and actually a number of military folks who want to take what they learned in the military and apply that to other types of public service as well. So that's something I think is a really cool kind of outgrowth of it. Finally, we have a whole number of partner organizations. We're just about to sign a new one, but we've got great ones with City Year and AmeriCorps and the Peace Corps and Teach for America and Teach for All, and a number of other, the Bonner Foundation, a couple of other organizations, right? And all these partner groups are places that encourage young people to get involved with service. And so what we say is, okay, if you're an alumnus of, say, Teach for America or AmeriCorps, and we admit you, we will waive your application fee, and we will give you at least $8,000 in scholarship aid. And so why do we do this? Well, we do it because we know from our past experience that the students who are from those types of organizations are our best students, right? Because they've really demonstrated a dedication and a commitment to public service, which for us is one of our hallmarks that we look at when we're evaluating students in the application process. We really want to see people, right, who have a passion for working in the public sector and who want to drive change forward. And, if you've spent 2 years, doing Teach for America or AmeriCorps or a similar program, then you've demonstrated that. We want to reward that with a scholarship, right? And we certainly also have some other general scholarships as well. Our strategy is to give as many people as we can some aid, so no one's getting a full ride. I wish we could do that. Unfortunately, we can't. But we try to give everyone some aid to help them defray the cost of pursuing a Fels degree. So let's talk a little bit about some application deadlines. I know it still seems like a long way away, but our deadline will be here before you know it. So if you're interested for applying for that full-time, that 1-year degree program, that comes in that deadline is in January, in mid-January. But we also have a priority deadline of mid-December. We can talk about that if you're interested. The executive MPA deadline is going to be rolling, and that'll be in May when that one comes due. But that's a rolling admissions process. So if you're interested in applying, don't wait until May because we admit students and spend down our financial aid budget on a rolling basis. So if you're interested, definitely be in touch with Mindy and we'll talk to you about getting started on an application, because you can certainly do that sooner. So the requirements for applying, you're going to need to fill out an online application. You can find the link to do that from our website. It's basically just going to record all your basic, demographic information. You need to upload a resume. You need to upload a personal statement, which for us has 2 parts. So the first part explains why Fels is a good fit for you and why you want to pursue a public sector degree. And I think those 2 things really go hand in hand, right? So why is it that you want to work in the public sector, and why is Fels the right step for you to get to where you want to go in the public sector? So I always find personal statement a little misleading. It's not your, kind of personal story or something, right? It's really kind of your chance to sell yourself to us, right? Why are you someone, when we read this file, that we're going to say, yes, that's someone we absolutely have to have in our next cohort of 30 students. And then the second part of that is we ask you to talk about a time when you used data to drive a decision, because that's one of the kind of hallmarks here at Fels, right? And so that takes on a lot of different forms. For some people, they'll talk about their job, but other people talk about an experience they had in school, or maybe student government, or a different organization. So there's lots of different ways of demonstrating. We kind of want to see your thinking and your decision-making skills in that. Next, you have to submit your transcripts, so all of your, kind of school transcripts, and then 2 letters of recommendation. So those can be from the 2 people you think can speak best to your promise in the program. That might be 2 faculty members. It might be a faculty member and a boss. It might be, 2 bosses. We'll leave it up to you, but think about the people who can best speak to why you would, be a good fit here at Fels. And then for students who are interested in applying for the full-time program, they have to submit either a GRE or LSAT score. People who are applying for the executive program who have at least 5 years of work experience do not need to submit their test scores. They're optional, but all full-time students do. So one of the questions we get a lot from people is, well, maybe I don't have the strongest academic record, right? I had someone come up a few years ago and say, look, I kind of screwed around a little bit in college. I didn't really kind of figure out what I wanted to do until, close to the end. And so my grades aren't great, but I've got good work experience. That's totally okay. Look, we're going to take your academic background into account, but part of what I tell people is your, job in selecting who writes your letters of recommendation, doing your personal statement and essay is showing us the full you, right? And so if one part of your application is a little bit weaker, right, talk about your, you can acknowledge that and talk about how you're going to build on your strengths while you're here, right? So maybe if your academic credentials, weren't the best, right, you didn't find your way until the end of college, and hey, we all know that happens. Talk about how you learned from that, how you're going to do better, here, because you're going to be, more focused, and show us evidence of that. So show us your commitment to public service, and show us, what steps you're taking to do that, right? So it's up to you to kind of use the application process, right, to show us why, we really want to have you as part of our next class.